My name is Cameron Cam Monroe. And for 6 weeks, I didn't step foot in my own apartment. Believe me, even I struggle to explain how you go from earning 6 figures at a hip blockchain gaming startup to watching your sister treat your home like a free-for-all. But that's exactly where I found myself, stranded on a friend's couch in Austin, Texas. While my family smiled and nodded as she tore my life apart, it began on a rainy Tuesday. Austin's trademark spring drizzle, the kind that turns every street lamp halo into a moody film noir shot. I was elbow-deep in code, debugging a CI/CD pipeline, headphones blasting lo-fi beats. When my phone buzzed, it was Harley, my 27-year-old sister, a social media influencer whose day in my life reels had more views than my entire department at work. Her text was late-night desperate Cam. I got dumped. Can crash a few days. He hesitated. My calendar was packed stand-up meeting at 8 a.m. A live demo with investors at 2 p.m. Then a weekend hackathon. But siblings are family unconditional. So I said yes. Next morning, my spare room had morphed into Harley's personal studio. Ring lights, a backdrop that read Harley's house vibes, and her luggage scattered like confetti. Before long, her friends paraded in makeup artists, co-hosts, and online fans who treated my peaceful retreat as an open house. My white walls bore lipstick smudges. My coffee table was lost under half-empty wine bottles and energy shots. When my 7 a.m. video call froze because Cardi B was blasting through the walls and someone screamed body shots, I realized this wasn't a few days, it was an occupation. I texted her gently, "Hey, can we tone it down? I have a big pitch." But on her story, she captioned it, "Brother hates my vibe hog," and tagged my handle. My pitch tanked. A $20K contract slipped through my fingers. That night, I confronted her. I stood in the doorway, her fuchsia sneakers lining the hallway, and said, "Harley, this isn't working. You gotta find another spot." She looked up, scrolling her phone, and sneered. "You're so dramatic. I'm your sister, you've got to be compassionate." Her casual drip of entitlement hit me like ice water compassion. Only if it didn't inconvenience her. I packed a bag and left. My parents didn't call. My aunt streaming PR snaps didn't ask where I was. Silence followed me to Max's couch, my colleague who loaned me a makeshift bed. And in that silence, something shifted. I remembered late nights in community college. Buying my first laptop with my own savings, and never once did anyone cheer. I was the quiet kid in the back. A footnote in family photos. But silence isn't weakness, it can be a blade. So I sharpened mine. I installed a tiny motion-detecting camera behind a broken shard of mirror I'd saved from my bathroom remodel symbolic, reflecting only fragments of this chaos. I enlisted Max to route the feed through a secure VPN. I started logging every sale she live-streamed my gaming console, my vintage headphones, even the limited edition pin I'd won at a conference. Then came the real twist. One evening, scrolling through my encrypted footage, I spotted Harley's live stream overlay showing my company's private repo credentials I'd accidentally shown on a bedtime vlog. She'd used my own trust to breach my work portal. This was no prank, it was corporate sabotage. If that got out, I'd lose everything. I contacted Derek Nguyen, a tech-focused attorney. Together, we planned a surgical strike, expose her lease violation, file for identity fraud, and loop in the landlord. But I needed the perfect moment, a show of evidence that couldn't be ignored. Tonight is that night. There's a family celebration on the rooftop, Elsa's artisanal pizza. Soft string lights. My parents cooing over Harley's next big project. They'll be expecting a smiling, apologetic Cam, the obedient brother. Instead, I'll walk in unannounced. Mirror shard hidden in my coat. Footage queued up on my phone, ready to collide their applause with undeniable truth. So here I am, perched outside that penthouse door. Heart thrumming in my chest, equal parts, fear and resolve. The line between betrayal and justice is about to blur. And I'm the only one holding the prism to reveal every fracture. Stay with me. This silent blade is about to shine. I slipped through the penthouse door just after dusk, when the string lights on the rooftop flickered to life like fireflies caught in amber. My heart was a hammer in my chest. But I steadied myself by tucking the broken mirror shard into my jacket pocket, a fragment of reflection I'd carried everywhere for 6 weeks. A constant reminder that family can only see the parts they choose to. The rooftop was crowded with the usual suspects, Aunt Rosa broadcasting in one corner, her phone balanced on a makeshift tripod, Steve and Linda beaming beside the artisanal pizza stand, and of course Harley, all neon nails, and perfectly tousled hair, hawking some new empowerment series for her followers. The music was lo-fi, loungy, but it still grated against my nerves because every beat felt like a countdown to exposure. I paused at the edge of the crowd, let my eyes scan the scene, memorizing the angles and the lighting so I could cue my evidence with technical precision. I could have burst in with a swagger, dared them to laugh in my face. But that's not how I operate. I'm a DevOps engineer, not an actor. I know the power of quiet infrastructure, a code pipeline that fails silently, a server that crashes without warning. My strategy was similar, a sudden, unannounced feed of unassailable proof that would implode Harley's staged reality and leave my family with no choice but to watch the real story. First, I synced my phone to the rooftop's Wi-Fi. No one noticed me crouched beside the HVAC unit, tapping settings while pretending to check my watch. That hacker's dance felt oddly familiar, echoing back to late nights at the community college computer lab, where I learned that permission isn't granted, it's taken. I opened the secure app, queued up the footage of Harley selling my limited edition gaming setup in a midnight flash sale, then the clip of her forging my signature on the HOA complaint, and finally the damning livestream overlay that revealed my company's private repo credentials floating over her party. I wandered toward Harley like I was there to congratulate her. A smile plastered on my face, so practiced it could have been rented. "Hey," I said, voice casual enough to slip past the chatter. "Nice turnout." She beamed, plucking her phone from her back pocket. "Cam, I didn't even tell you it's trending under number family goals." A circle of cameras turned my way, Rosa's ultra-wide, Harley's ring light rig, even the pizza chef's GoPro mounted at head height. I ground my teeth behind that smile, remembering every time I'd been invisible in family photos. The quiet one shoved to the back. Now, all eyes were on me. Family goals. Huh, I nodded, leaning in as if to speak a secret. I want to toast to that. People raised glasses. I pulled the mirror shard from my jacket, let it catch a sliver of neon glow before flicking it toward the pizza stand. The shard twirled like a falling star, then clattered on the metal tray. In that instant, the shard's jagged reflection fractured every light on the rooftop, scattering shards of illumination across faces that hadn't noticed I was gone. Gasps echoed. Rosa cursed in 3 languages as she tried to steady her phone. My parents blinked up at the shards of gleaming red and gold. Perplexed, Harley's smile faltered. I lifted my phone and hit play. The rooftop speaker's crackled evidence spilled into the air. First, the sale, my vintage headphones slipping from my sister's palm into a stranger's outstretched hand as I watched in real time through the camera feed. Then the HOA clip, my scrawled signature appearing on a complaint form, accusing neighbors of noise. The audio faint but unmistakable, Harley's laughter trailing behind each forged character. Finally, the live overlay my company's private code-based credentials, scrolling across her live stream interface like an eclipse of my career. The rooftop fell silent except for the playback. The only sound was the fragment of glass in my pocket, cutting through the tension, a heartbeat measuring every second since I'd vanished. They'd been so eager to defend her drama that they never questioned the cost to me. Now the cost was a family's collective gasp. Wide-eyed and exposed. Steve's face went ashen. Linda's lips trembled. Rosa yanked her phone away and stared at me like I'd become a ghost. Harley stood frozen, ring light humming, phone still streaming. When the last clip ended, there was only one choice, satisfaction or panic. To my surprise, I saw something in her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability, as though she'd finally glimpsed me beyond the follower count. But it was fleeting. She shook her head, warded off my phone like it was a contagion, and shouted, This is edited. She tried to click to a different scene. But her network buckled under the encrypted feed I'd set up. I stepped closer. My voice was low, but carried. It's all real. The shards of light danced across her face, reflecting the fracture she'd created within our family. Every sale, every forged line, every credential leak, it's here. I let the shard catch one last glint and dropped it at her feet. And you know the worst part, none of you even noticed I was gone. At that moment, something in the crowd shifted. A few followers slipped away silently. Harley's metrics suddenly looked brittle. Lena, her co-host, paled and offered me a nod of solidarity before ducking out. I sensed the social web unraveling, the influencer bubble bursting under the weight of real consequences. But before I could savor the breakdown, Aunt Rosa demanding to know who leaked her PR footage, and my parents stumbling over apologies I wasn't there to receive. I felt the tug of something else. A text vibrated in my pocket. I ignored it at first, but the buzz persisted, a single word on my locked screen: Dad. I pocketed my phone and turned back to the rooftop arena. The shard of mirror lay broken at Harley's heels. The last symbol of our fractured trust. I could finish them off with more evidence, more legal muscle. But he hesitated. My gut told me the real power lay in walking away, letting the silence I'd mastered cut deeper than any accusation. So I raised my hand in a slow salute, met my parents' eyes for the first time that night, and whispered, "Goodbye." I stepped off the rooftop into the waiting night, the neon glow of Austin's skyline guiding my path. Behind me, the penthouse erupted into chaos of cries and shouts, but I didn't look back. The mirror shard had fractured their illusions. Now it was time for me to find all the pieces of my own reflection. And as I vanished into the city streets, a final flicker of light caught the shard in Harley's hand, catching her off guard, leaving us both with only questions and the echo of a story far from over. I found myself back on Max's sagging couch well past midnight, the Austin skyline bleeding neon through his dusty blinds, while my mind raced faster than any CI/CD pipeline I'd ever orchestrated. My jacket lay slumped beside me, still carrying the weight of that jagged mirror shard tucked in an inside pocket, its edges pressing reminders of fractured trust against my ribs. I knew I couldn't stay on someone else's couch forever. This was my fight, my mess to clean up. But for a moment, the silence of Max's living room felt like the calm before a reckoning. I pulled out my laptop, the device I'd once depended on to automate deployments. Now, my tool for something far more personal, rebuilding my own story. On one screen sat Derek Nguyen's email. Subject line: strategy briefing, next steps. The body outlining how we'd subpoena the HOA records, strengthen our criminal fraud case, and issue a cease and desist notice for her online content. On the other screen was Sophie Alvarez's draft press release: Tech Bros Home Invasion Expose, Blockchain Engineer versus Social Media Sensation. Sophie, Harley's former PR confidant, had reached out after seeing the rooftop fallout leak into industry Slack channels. She promised discretion and a sympathetic ear. In her world, nuance still mattered. But I hesitated. I'd always believed in quiet competence, in letting my work speak for itself. And the idea of a public spectacle made my chest tighten. Was I trading one kind of invisibility for another? Exposing Harley in the press risked turning my personal turmoil into tabloid fodder. Yet every time I thought about retreating, the image of her selling my graduation pin, a gold-engraved pen I'd given to my parents on the day I graduated community college, flashed behind my eyelids. That pen symbolized every late night, every side gig, every moment I'd spent scrapping for respect. She'd pawed at it like it was meaningless. I shut my eyes and let the weight of that pen anchor me. It wasn't just metal. It was the promise I made to myself to be seen on my own terms. I opened Sophie's email draft, deleted the clickbait headline, and rewrote it in the simplest language I could muster. When family betrayal becomes corporate sabotage, one engineer's story. Short, factual, human. Then I forwarded it to Derek with a note. Let's remind them why nuance matters. Next, I called Max and asked him to meet me at the co-working space our old startup had vacated. The place was half empty. Furniture moved to the corners. Cables dangling from unplugged conference rooms. An apt metaphor for our conversation. I need you to build me a portal. I told him. Voice low. A lockbox where my evidence lives. Encrypted. Anonymous access. I want every journalist, every lawyer, every landlord to see exactly what happened, no more. No less. Max nodded. Already sketching network diagrams on a whiteboard. I'll use multi-factor. Blockchain notarization timestamps. It'll be bulletproof. As he talked architecture, my phone buzzed with a text from Eli Turner. The tech reporter I'd met through Sophie. Heard about the fallout. Want your side. Can meet tonight, I typed back yes. Then exhaled. Talking to the press felt like stepping on a stage I'd always avoided. But I'd built things for a living. Now it was time to build my own narrative. That evening, we met at a dimly lit bar tucked behind a taco truck. Eli's lanky frame huddled over a half-empty IPA as he fired questions. Why didn't your parents notice you were gone? When did you realize your sister was out to ruin you? What does this say about family loyalty in a social media age? I sipped my own drink. The cold glass, a contrast to the heat of his gaze. I told him about the late-night texts, the rooftop confrontation, the footage of my private repo credentials flashing across her live stream. And I told him about the pen, how Harley pawning it felt like she was pawning my achievements. My work ethic. Eli leaned back, tapped notes on his tablet. This isn't just a sibling feud, it's emblematic of how likes and followers can warp our real-world relationships. Most people are puppeteered by the audience. You're fighting back. His words hit home. Our society worships noise, likes, clicks, followers at the expense of quiet integrity. That collision of personal betrayal and social media spectacle was my story's beating heart. Walking back to Max's place after, I felt the old familiar spark, the thrill of building something meaningful. But danger wasn't far behind. A week ago, Harley had blocked my numbers. Now, unknown accounts started pinging me with threats. Keep your sister's name out of the press or watch your career crash. My firewall logs flagged repeated intrusion attempts. Whoever was behind it knew tech. My chest tightened. This was bigger than a family spat. He emailed Derek potential cyber harassment. Can we escalate to the FBI's cyber division? He replied within minutes. On it. I'll draft paperwork tomorrow. Sleep was impossible. So I returned to the evidence lockbox portal. Max nearly finished. I watched as timestamps flickered across the blockchain ledger the day of the rooftop. The day I walked out. The day she sold my gear. Ach, block immutable. Each entry a testament to truth. At dawn, I stared at the login screen. Heart pounding. My reflection in the dark monitor looked gaunt. Eyes ringed with exhaustion. In that moment, I realized this fight was about more than retribution. It was for every quiet kid overshadowed by someone louder. For every engineer whose hours of toil go unnoticed in a culture that celebrates spectacle. I pressed enter, granting access to Sophie and Eli and Derek. The portal unlocked. Data streamed out. By the time breakfast rolled around, the story was live on Tech Circuit. Blockchain engineer exposes social media sabotage and family betrayal. Comments flooded in, some sympathetic. Others accusing me of overreacting. But the facts were there. Unassailable. The golden pen image. The mirror shard motif. Even a clip of my mother's horrified expression from the rooftop. The human details turned a legal case into a moral one. Then my phone buzzed with an email from my father. I almost deleted it unread. But the subject line, urgent family estate meeting, stopped me cold. I clicked. The body was brief, Cam. We've scheduled a house meeting to discuss the Monroe estate. We'd like your input. Sunday. 4 p.m. Old family home. Please attend. No signature. My chest tightened again, this time with dread. The old family home meant ancestral memories. The place where my achievements once mattered. And the word estate hinted at money. Legacy things Harley always bragged about. I shut my laptop and stared at the ceiling. I could ignore it, stay hidden while my story unfolded online. But something in me recoiled at that. The mirror shard in my pocket felt heavier. This was my family's last stronghold. The very symbol they used to exclude me, the creaking porch where my siblings were always allowed to take center stage. And Sunday was in 3 days. My reflection flickered in the window, a man who'd mastered silence. Now forced to speak. The portal was live. The press was abuzz. But the final confrontation loomed. I had built digital defenses. Now I had to show up in person. Unprotected. I rose, pocketed the shard and the pen, and exhaled a slow breath. The next phase wasn't behind a screen, it was face to face. In the house where I'd first learned my voice could be drowned out by someone else's. Sunday at 4 p.m. The clock was ticking, and I sensed another fracture waiting to open under my family's polished facade. The mirror shard in my pocket pressed its jagged reminder against my side. I could either shy away into a safer narrative or shatter their illusions once and for all. I stepped out into the cool Austin morning, heart stealing for the reckoning still to come, and wondered if I was ready to risk it all for the truth I'd finally built. I arrived at the old Monroe family home just after 3:30 on Sunday. Sun dipping low behind the magnolia trees that lined the driveway. The place was a relic, pale yellow clapboards peeling at the corners. A wraparound porch sagging under years of dust and memories. I'd spent every summer here as a kid riding my bike down the cracked sidewalk, chasing cicadas in the yard, but today it felt alien. The estate meeting invitation my father sent was sparse. Please join us Sunday at 4. Esta discussion. No names. No context. The ambiguity was intentional. They wanted leverage. What they didn't know was I'd already built my own. I parked in front, heart thudding. In my coat pocket, the broken mirror shard and my gold-engraved graduation pen sat side by side. Two symbols of my journey, the shard, a record of our family fractures. The pen, a testament to every triumph they ignored. Inside, the foyer smelled of antique wood polish and lingering regret. The mahogany staircase wound upward like a sentinel. On the wall, an old black and white photograph of my parents on their wedding day. Radiant youth captured forever. I paused, imagining how easily photos immortalize moments and bury the ones that follow. I stepped into the parlor, where Steve and Linda sat flanked by Aunt Rosa, phone in hand, plus two unfamiliar faces, a stone-faced lawyer in a crisp suit, and a stern-looking woman with a ledger folder. Cam, my father said. Voice too. My mother managed a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. Rosa quickly lowered her phone. We're glad you came, she said. The lawyer cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the Monroe Estate Trust. Distribution of assets. Trusts for future generations. He trailed off, eyes flicking to me. I nodded. They expected me to shuffle papers, nod politely, and sign away what little I thought belonged to me. But I wasn't the same quiet kid who let applause go to his sister while my achievements gathered dust. I cleared my throat. Before we get into the trust, I have something to share. I held up the mirror shard. This represents what happens when you ignore half the reflection. My pen. I corrected, landed on the coffee table. And this, I said, placing the pen beside it, is the only signature I want to leave on this estate. Their confusion rippled across the room. My father's face paled. My mother's lips parted. Rosa glanced at the lawyer. I continued, voice calm but firm. I've spent the last month documenting every transaction, every forgery, every breach of trust my sister inflicted. The evidence is in the portal. Max built blockchain timestamps, encrypted logs, videos of each sale. You can access it at any time. I pulled out my phone, unlocked the secure app, and let the paused interface glow on the screen time-stamped entries. A digital ledger of betrayal. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Monroe, this is not relevant to the estate discussion. I cut him off. It is because you never asked about my absence. You never asked what happened to this pen I gave you on graduation day. Instead, you let her treat my home and my achievements as if they were disposable. My mother blinked back tears. My father looked between us, guilt pressing lines into his forehead. The ledger woman tightened her grip on her folder. I leaned forward. I'm not here to litigate who gets what inheritance. I'm here to establish one thing: respect. If you can't see me as your son, if you still see me as the backup plan for Haley's mess, then I'll reclaim what's mine. I tapped the pen. This pen and this shard are my terms. I choose myself. I'm opting out of the Monroe Estate Trust. Shock hit them like a physical blow. My lawyer colleague in Austin had warned opting out would renounce any rights to the family assets. But at this point, I didn't want their money, I wanted their recognition. And they'd forfeited it. My mother's voice broke. Cam. Please. I raised my hand. Silencing her. I'm done waiting for you to notice me. I walked away from the penthouse. I walked away from the hackathons. And I walked away from this house when you ignored my value. I stood, the shard glinting in the late afternoon light seeping through stained glass windows. I've built a life where my work is seen, where my voice matters. I gestured beyond the parlor door. If you'd like the portal credentials, Derek can provide them. Otherwise, this conversation ends here. I turned and walked out. On the porch, the air felt cooler. The ledger woman caught up and shoved a thick envelope into my hands. Your parents insisted. Inside the original estate trust documents. Signatures scrawled in neat ink. I glanced at the signatures, my name absent. I slipped it into my jacket and descended the steps. No one followed. The front door closed behind me with a hollow click. I paused at the driveway, glancing back at the porch where my family watched from the window. In my pocket, the shard rattled a reminder of broken bonds. In my hand, the papers were heavy with severed ties. I exhaled, heart pounding with the risk I'd taken, renouncing my claim fully, severing the last thread, tying me to their expectations. And yet, I felt lighter than I had in years. As I walked toward my car, I realized the biggest twist wasn't the legal fallout, but the emotional one by rejecting the estate. I'd reclaimed my agency. The power lay not in their approval, but in my decision to define my own worth. But the evening sky was darkening, and a new message flashed on my phone. Hey Cam, got the portal link. People are talking. News cycles shifting. Meet me, it was Sophie. I tapped yes. Then looked once more at the looming house. The chapter here was closed. But another was beginning, one where I'd build my legacy on my own terms. Free from shadows of the past. In the twilight, I felt the shard and the pen both warm against my chest, a fractured reflection made whole by choice. And as I drove away from the old family home, the mirror shard's jagged edge felt less like a wound and more like a map to where I was headed next. I spent the next morning drinking coffee on my rooftop balcony, watching dawn break over Austin's skyline as if the city itself exhaled relief. The shard of mirror and the gold pen lay on the small table beside me, my talismans of rupture and reclamation, while my laptop pinged with a steady stream of new notifications. The portal Max built was live, and the evidence of Harley's betrayal was circulating through legal circles, industry news outlets, and even family friends who finally saw my side of the story. Sophie's revised article had run on Tech Circuit, complete with an embedded clip of the rooftop confrontation. The comments ranged from outrage, how could they let that go on, to admiration. Cam handled it like a pro. But beneath the applause lay a subtle current of skepticism, a few voices doubting whether the fallout had been overblown, whether a brother really deserved that kind of public spectacle against his sister. That undercurrent gnawed at me. I'd wielded the noise of social media as a weapon. But could it turn against me? In our voyeuristic culture, the line between hero and villain shifts with every click. I closed the lid on the laptop and ran a hand through my hair, feeling the weight of unintended consequences. My quiet fight for dignity was now fodder for armchair critics. Somewhere between vindication and performative victory, I risked becoming one more story to scroll past. I shook off the doubt. Strength doesn't come from validation, it comes from conviction. I slipped the shard into my pocket, grabbed the pen, and headed downstairs. My destination, the co-working space where Max had almost finished the lockbox portal. We had one last integration to run a witness node for public audit. Anyone could verify that the timestamps and video hashes hadn't been tampered with. Transparency was my ethos. I didn't want to trade one form of secrecy for another. Max greeted me with a tired but triumphant grin. It's done, he said, gesturing to his screen. Now we have a Web3 notarization layer. It's public, immutable, and can even be attested by third parties. I tapped the shard in my pocket. Perfect. Let's link the press release so anyone reading Sophie's story can click and see the raw data. As he coded, I watched his fingers dance over the keys. Each line of code a stitch, sewing my fractured narrative back together. Even in the glow of his monitors, I caught a glimpse of something I hadn't felt in years, genuine collaboration. But victory was never straightforward. That afternoon, a short email arrived, urgent contract risk notification. It was from my startup's HR department. They'd been alerted to the leaked credentials that Harley broadcast in her live stream, and investors were nervous about potential compliance breaches. They wanted me in a Zoom meeting ASAP. My breath caught. The very evidence I'd used to prove her wrongdoing could now jeopardize my career. The moment I published the portal and let it spread, I relinquished control. The risk of corporate fallout was real. Regulators might see me as complicit in the exposure of private data, even if I was the victim of identity theft. My phone buzzed again, a message from Derek. My attorney. Prepare for potential subpoenas from both sides. It read, "They may question your role in the credentials breach, even though it's her fault." I ran outside, the Texas sun hot on my skin. My reflection shimmered on the glass barrier of the rooftop, a fractured image. Half hero, half collateral damage. I closed my eyes, grounded myself in the memory of late-night coffee runs, of community college computer labs where trust meant nothing without a 5-step verification process. I returned to my desk and drafted an email to HR, detailing the chronology, how Harley'd accessed the repo, her unauthorized use, my immediate action to secure our systems, and the fact that I'd reported the breach to our security team as soon as I discovered it. Then I attached a link to the notarized portal, so they could verify the timestamps themselves. It was a gamble exposing my fight to internal scrutiny, but I refused to let fear of consequences silence the truth. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I joined the Zoom call. Investors, board members, and HR reps stared back at me from their black rectangles of anxiety and curiosity. I spoke clearly, walked them through the portal, the code, the breach, and my remediation plan. When I finished, the silence felt heavier than applause. But then one board member nodded. Another muttered, "Impressive forensics." By the end, they agreed to a formal review rather than immediate termination. It wasn't a victory lap, it was a reprieve. And it reminded me that truth can be messy. But integrity demands we face the mess head-on. Later that night, alone in my apartment, finally my own space again, I held the mirror shard up to my reflection. The jagged edges caught the city lights, sending fractured shards of glow across the walls. I realized this battle was more than sibling revenge. It was a collision between personal honor and a society that trades authenticity for spectacle. My pen rested on the table like a beacon, a reminder that real power lies in writing your own story, not letting the algorithm dictate your worth. My phone lit up with a text from Mia Patel, Cam's former confidant, someone whose casual remark years ago had quieted me in family gatherings. Saw the tech expose. Proud of you. Drinks tomorrow. A small smile cracked my stoic facade. Connection. Genuine connection. Had once seemed secondary to achievement. Now it felt essential. I pocketed the shard and pen, closed my laptop, and headed to the door. The night air was cool, the city humming a lullaby of distant traffic and neon signs. As I walked toward the elevator, my phone buzzed again. Sunday's trailer drop is live. Cameron Monroe's story. It was Sophie's latest, a multimedia trailer weaving footage of the shard, the rooftop confrontation, the courtroom prep, and a lone shot of me gazing out a rainy window. The final tagline rolled, "When you disappear, the truth finds you." My heart raced. The story was far from over public opinion. Corporate reviews, family reckonings all loomed. But I felt ready. I stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the lobby, and exhaled. The shard's weight in my pocket was less like a wound, more like a compass pointing me forward. Tonight, I'd celebrate the first victory in a battle for respect. Tomorrow, I'd face whatever aftermath came next. And as the doors closed, the city lights blurred into streaks of promise and peril, an open road waiting for someone brave enough to drive it. I woke to the sound of rain tapping against my apartment window, Austin's spring shower bringing that familiar hush before the world stirs. The shard of mirror lay on my nightstand beside the gold pen. reflecting fractured streaks of lamplight across the ceiling. I ran my finger along its jagged edge, marveling at how something broken could still catch light so beautifully. It was a reminder that our lives, too, can be splintered, yet still shine when we choose to see ourselves whole. Today was the day the commissioners would decide on the HOA hearing, determine whether Harley's eviction stood or if she'd get another chance to appeal. It felt surreal that a family spat had dragged me into municipal courtroom drama, but I'd never been one to back down when the stakes were high. I dressed quickly in a crisp button-down and jeans casual enough to blend in, polished enough to command respect, and tucked the shard and pen into my coat pocket like talismans. I paused by the mirror, imagining the shards of my past life scattered across that penthouse, the gaming console, my diploma, my console controller, each piece sold or smashed by my sister, each fragment a memory I thought lost. Now I carried a shard with me, proof that every fracture could be reclaimed. The courthouse loomed like a fortress of bureaucracy, its limestone pillars etched by years of arguments and precedent. Inside, a drab waiting room smelled of stale coffee and anxious sweat. I spotted Derek Nguyen at a corner table, his suit impeccably tailored, briefcase open, files neatly organized. Sophie Alvarez sat beside him, note-taking on her tablet, while Eli Turner hovered nearby with a recorder hidden in his lapel. Max hovered by the doorway, a silent sentinel ready to encrypt the next chapter. It felt like a clandestine operation, a coalition of misfits gathered to right a wrong. I slid into the seat beside Sophie, and she gave me a reassuring nod. "You ready?" she whispered. I closed my eyes and inhaled, letting the pen's smooth metal remind me of every late night, every quiet code review, every moment I'd sacrificed for integrity. When my name was called, I walked to the bench with steady steps, no swagger, but no hesitation. The commissioners looked down at me through frameless glasses, expecting a rote hearing on lease violations. Instead, I began with the shard. "This mirror shard represents the breach of trust," I said, holding it aloft so the overhead lights caught its edges. What happened in my apartment was more than noise complaints. It was a systematic dismantling of my home and career. I laid out the timeline: Harley's unauthorized entry, the live-streamed sales, the forged signature, the leaked credentials. Each piece of evidence was time-stamped, notarized, and immutable. The portal Max built blinked on a large screen behind me, blockchain hashes simulated in a slick interface. I saw one commissioner lean forward. They'd never seen a homeowner bring tech forensics to a local HOA board. My voice stayed calm. "I'm not here to embarrass my sister. I'm here to protect my property and my livelihood." I explained how the HOA complaint she'd forged could have led to fines against the next-door neighbor, how my insurance premiums soared because of false noise reports. She turned my home into a spectacle, then hid behind family loyalty when I called her out. "Now I'm imploring this board to uphold the eviction order, so I can reclaim my sanctuary." I placed the pen on the podium, as a symbol of my commitment to truth and respect. When I finished, the room was so quiet, you could hear rain splattering on the skylight. The commissioners whispered among themselves. Behind me, Sophie exhaled softly, and Derek met my eye with a nod. The chairman cleared his throat. "Mr. Monroe, your evidence is compelling," he said. "We'll issue our ruling in 2 hours." 2 hours felt like a lifetime. As I stepped down, camera flashes popped from Eli's recorder, capturing the moment I stood up for myself in a room built on rules I'd never known existed. Outside, rain fell in sheets, washing the courthouse steps clean. I turned to find Harley leaning against a column, mascara streaked, phone in hand, her face pale beneath the neon of passing cars. She looked vulnerable, the mask of the influencer stripped away, leaving just a person who'd buried her guilt under filters and hashtags. I felt a pang of empathy, not for her actions, but for the girl who must have realized too late that fame and family loyalty aren't guarantees of kindness. She glanced at me, eyes wary. "Cam," she said, voice low. I want to apologize." The words felt foreign, awkward on her lips. I studied her, her arched brow trembling. The way she avoided eye contact. The shard in my pocket burned against my hip. I could demand more public humiliation. A viral takedown, but I'd learned that power doesn't always come from the roar of revenge. Sometimes it comes from the choice to forgive on your own terms. I took a step closer, rain dripping from the brim of my jacket. Harley, what you did was unacceptable. But this isn't just about money or contracts. It's about respect. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the shard, slipping it into her hand. This might help you remember that actions have consequences, even if no one's watching. Her fingers closed over the glass fragment as though it burned, and maybe it did. I turned and walked away, leaving her alone on the slick steps while the rain washed over her. I found a bench under an awning and waited. The storm, a drumbeat in my ears. My phone buzzed. Derek's text board upholds eviction. Order effective immediately. My chest loosened as relief and triumph mingled. I typed back, "Thank you," then leaned back, letting the rain cool my skin. For the first time since this all began, everything felt in its rightful place. My home would be mine again, free from trespass and betrayal. But the night wasn't over. My phone lit up with another message. This one from Eli. Interview goes live at midnight. Global feed. Sophie's multimedia trailer was going global. The story of a family feud turned tech expose was about to reach audiences far beyond Austin. I felt a thrill my narrative would resonate with anyone who'd ever felt unseen. Anyone who'd ever fought for a fragment of recognition. Yet I also felt a tremor of unease once a story goes viral. You can't control how it's told, or who it hurts. The shard's spirit flickered in my pocket, reminding me that truths can cut both ways. I stood, brushing rain from my hair, and headed back toward my car. The shard and pen weighed heavy in my coat, symbols of the journey from silence to self-assertion. I thought of the broken penthouse, now vacant, and the old family home, now locked behind resignation. My life had been a series of fractures, moments when I was overlooked, silenced, dismissed. But for every fracture, I'd found a way to reclaim the pieces, forging a mosaic of my own choosing. As I drove through wet streets, headlights shimmering on asphalt, the radio announced my story. In summary, a headline about DevOps engineers' viral expose. Listeners called in, sharing tales of their own family betrayals, their own moments of invisibility. A pulse of connection spread through the city, unearthing shared wounds and sparks of solidarity. I realized that my fight had become more than personal. It was a symbol of something broader, the struggle for recognition in a world that often values noise over nuance. I pulled up to my apartment building, the neon sign flickering. Welcome. Inside, my place felt different. Every clean line of furniture, every book on the shelf, every blank wall reclaimed. I set the shard on the coffee table, pen beside it, and sat on the couch. As the midnight hour approached, I stared at my phone, braced for the global interview feed to roll in. The storm outside had eased, leaving a soft patter on the windowsill. The shard caught a final streak of light before the clouds swallowed the moon. Then, at exactly midnight, my phone buzzed with a live stream notification. I tapped it and saw my own face on screen, eyes tired but resolute. Sophie's voice chimed in. "This is not just Cameron Monroe's story, it's ours." The chat window flooded with hearts and affirmations. I closed my eyes, letting the moment wash over me. The shard in my pocket felt warm, the pen solid in my hand. I'd faced betrayal, risked my career, severed family ties, and reclaimed my worth. And in doing so, I'd become part of a larger conversation about trust, technology, and the meaning of home. But as I watched the live comments scroll, one message stood out, flashing in stark white letters. "What about Mom and Dad? Why haven't they spoken to him?" The question hovered like a specter. My victory had come at a cost. My family's fractured bonds were still broken, their voices silent. I closed the stream and picked up the shard, turning it over in my fingers. The pen shone next to it, promising new beginnings. Yet the shard reminded me that some cracks never fully close. I set them both aside, exhaling a slow breath. The night beyond my window was quiet, but in my mind, A new storm was gathering questions of reconciliation, forgiveness, and whether the cost of truth had been too high. I reached for my phone and hesitated before dialing my mother's number. The line rang. Carrying my heartbeat in its pauses, I looked at the shard on the table, its edges sharp but catching light even in darkness, and realized that the next act of courage might not be in exposing betrayal, but in seeking a path back through the fractured mirror of family itself. The call continued to ring as thunder rolled distantly. And I sat there, pen in one hand, shard in the other, on the precipice of a different reckoning, one where silence, once wielded as a blade, could become a bridge. And in that suspended moment, I understood that the final chapter was still unwritten, waiting for the choice I'd make at the dial tone. Story 3, just in case. I concealed my $1.2 million estate when I got engaged. We signed the house into my name when my sister and dad came over 2 days after the wedding. Grinning, Mom said you would concur. I never said yes. I said, glancing at them. I called the bank that evening to have the documents reviewed. By morning, they were sobbing and holding boxes outside the gate. I was surprised that they would make it so clear. I had just returned from a quiet dinner with Emma, not 2 days after the wedding. It's the kind of night when you can finally breathe again after the adrenaline wears off. We were arguing over where to put the mugs, folding towels, and unpacking boxes. And then there was a knock. My sister was the one. She was grinning as if she had already triumphed. Dad was silent as he stood next to her. He always caused harm by leaving things out. She said brightly, "Hey, we only intended to stop by briefly." "Oh. And your mother said you would concur." Thus, we proceeded to register the house in my name, as though it were a birthday card. She held out a set of documents. I glanced down. There was no sign of my name. Not once. The property, the one I had concealed, she was now entitled to the one-eyed, inherited, but never displayed title. Mom said you would concur. She said it again, as though it were real. I didn't yell, didn't dispute. I only gave one blink. I never said yes. I said, glancing at both of them. I shut the door after that. They knocked again. But I didn't even stay in the room long enough to notice. I didn't give a damn. I went to the bedroom, picked up my laptop, and sat down with the peaceful stillness that comes from your body cooling down more than your mind. I started by logging into the estate account. Next, the bank. Next, the online portal of the title office. I explained access rights in detail, using the appropriate channels. An alert was sent to the security firm. The lawyer did the same. I had been discreetly retained. That evening, a formal letter of clarification was sent. I started receiving motion alerts on the front gate by morning. I didn't open the door, even though they were crying and carrying boxes back. Because something changed in that instant. I wasn't surprised. Not at all. I felt let down. Indeed. Furthermore, I was finished. I had entered this marriage with the hope that they would at last recognize the difference between leverage and love. However, this proved they noticed me. As a resource, not as a brother or a son. I made my move, and they made theirs. That night, I didn't get any sleep. My brain wouldn't stop showing me everything at once. Not because I was upset. That was the first line. You'd agree for words for detonators. Mom said. Emma slept in one by one while I gazed at the ceiling. Memories began to pour in, all bound by the same reasoning. Not reason. Really presumption. Entitlement. Manipulation. Wore family attire. Dad forgot his wallet when I was 12. So I used my allowance to buy a pizza. He never reimbursed me. I assisted my sister in faking a project at the age of 16 so she could graduate. She never expressed gratitude. I took a second job when I was 24 to help pay my mom's medical bills, only to discover that she had used half of the money for a spa retreat. What's the worst? I remained silent. Every time I swallowed, I thought about it. You just do it for your family. One day, they will witness it. However, they didn't. They recognized a system, a gap, or a pattern that they could take advantage of. I could recall the first time I was put to use, used in a way that is truly comparable to infrastructure. A walking account number. Perhaps. It happened while Dad was at work. Downer. To keep him afloat, I offered to assist with rearranging his files. My name showed up on a loan application that I never signed 3 weeks later. He laughed when I challenged him. "Your credit has always been good," he said, as if that clarified everything. I looked at my own report that evening. He had used it 5 times. All for short-term, unpaid purposes. I recalled that my sister had once asked to use one of my business tools for a brief login. Cited her freelance work as the reason. I handed it to her. She made the sale. She charged $600 to a stranger for access to my private platform. It wasn't until I was locked out of my own dashboard that I realized. I went up to her. "It was just sitting there," she said with a smile. "It wasn't being used by you. Simply sitting there, such as my attendance at holidays. Similar to my name on the document. Like the estate worth $1. $2 million. I didn't ever dominate them. They didn't consider me a human being. They recognized a chance. A gate that is open. Months before the wedding, Emma once asked me if I trusted them. I recall taking too long to say yes. "You don't trust them?" she asked, glancing at me. "You simply feel accountable for them." She was also correct. Everything clicked. Individually. Joking that I'm the family's money hoard. The subtle cuts are similar to what Mom said. Brunch. All we're trying to do is be kind. You included. You don't believe you are important. And everyone chuckled as if it were a smart move. The home. That was the last piece of chess. They believed that I would not fight. I would then say, "Okay." With a shrug, since I always had, since they also trained me. However, they were unaware that the silence they took to be weakness was actually the start of something much more sinister. Consciousness. I was no longer blind. I wasn't a soft person. I had a close-up view of the pattern's formation. Mom didn't inquire. "Dad," she said. "Never defend it." He vanished. My sister never gave an explanation for her advantages. And it took like it was due each time I gave. When I was 8 years old, I recall standing at the kitchen counter and listening to my mother whisper to my father. He refuses to say no. He is simple. In their imaginations. I wasn't even in the room. I served as a tool. Yes, by default. And now something I hadn't touched now had my name on it. Referred to as a family business. Signed a document without consulting me. However, they overlooked something. I was no longer the 8-year-old. I wasn't the backup plan. The helper. Or the fixer. I was a man who did something. A man who would fortify his future with a firewall. After more than 20 years of silent observation, a man finally recognized the game for what it was. They anticipated quiet. They gained clarity. Furthermore, I had only just started to design the collapse. They interpreted the signature as a sign of triumph. As usual, they expected me to wake up and watch the documents unfold. I didn't. I got up before the sun came up. SAT on the bed's edge. Allowing my thoughts to wander over the numbers. One state had won. 2,000,001. In one last shutdown, they made 6 attempts to take what wasn't theirs. I was logged in by 6 in the morning. It looked like a war room on my desktop. Dashboards for finances and ownership records. Phone conversations that were recorded. The timestamp. Text messages. I locked the deed as my first action. Digitally as well as legally. All notifications were redirected to a safe, authorized channel. Alerts would be triggered by any modifications or attempts at access. The trust account was next. It was something I had made prior to the engagement. After I caught my sister prying into a personal drawer, there were 3 divisions in the trust. Upkeep of the estate. Emergency, contingency, and optional assistance. Everybody is invisible. Everything is within my power. Discretionary access was taken away. Within 20 minutes after receiving the ping, my lawyer verified it. I then dug deeper. They continued to use the phone lines that I had paid for through my family plan. They weren't canceled by me. I gave them a 72-hour notice to accept the transfer or risk losing service completely. I am the registered owner of my dad's car. A present, sure. But with conditions. I scheduled the pickup with the tow company that afternoon. Called the DMV. And got in touch with the registry to update ownership information. Not with malice, but with accuracy. My life had been declared open season by them. I was now securing the gates. While I was on hold with the cloud service provider, Emma entered. At first, she remained silent. I asked, "Do they know what's coming after?" They placed a coffee next to me and looked at the screen. "They really don't." I replied, "The revocation letters were sent by noon. Bank access has been denied. The joint card has been frozen. To be sure, I sent my CPA one last email. Moving forward, no signatures other than mine were to be honored. For a period. Additionally, I added a last clause to the operating agreement for the estate. Attempting to fraudulently transfer a title disqualifies a person from receiving any more trust distributions. I sent my sister a single message at 2:13 p.m. You created a future to which you had no right. Today is the last day. I then logged off. They returned that evening. I have boxes. Red eyes. My sister's voice had become softer. It meant nothing to us. She said, "Mom believed you would accept it. In any case, you weren't using the house." That phrase, "in any case, you weren't using the house." I partially opened the front door so they could see my face but not enter. I said it had nothing to do with the house. It had to do with your level of confidence that I would never say no. My father took the lead. "Let's have a conversation inside." "No." I replied. "Here. We converse." One of the boxes was put down by my sister. We gathered our belongings. We apologize. "All right. We ought not to have." I interrupted her. "The lawyers have it already. You call the lawyer for everything." She yelled, "It's family." "Exactly." I said, "Family members also don't falsify documents. Ownership is not assumed by family. Family does not erase." At the gate, no one wept. Quiet. Then Dad did his usual thing. Was attempted to change the tone. "You're going overboard. Nothing was taken by us. The title has not yet been processed." I stopped it. "So you're right," I said. It was visible to me. Land. The first actual hit. The day they acknowledged that they had been underestimating me for years. I gave them the impression that I was the giving one. The silent one. The guy who fixes things. I wasn't giving. Though, I had a plan. And now there was no more open support. I completed the sequence the following morning after logging into my private records archive. 3 letters. An estate lawyer. A member of the title office's compliance division. And a member of the local financial review board have flagged the attempt to look into possible fraud. Before I sent them, Emma read each one. She said, "They won't return from this." I said, "I'm not asking them to." The estate was triple locked by Thursday. My accounts were safe. I once granted them access to all of my assets, but they were inaccessible. I wasn't finished. Though, I got in touch with the private foundation that, thanks to my recommendation, had been paying for some of Mom's prescription drugs. I canceled the assistance. Please. Lawfully. Formally. The email was courteous. That afternoon wouldn't be the impact. I drove to the property, went through it by myself, and stood in the hallway where our early drawings were once displayed. Now they were gone, and silence had taken their place. I wiped their access from the smart lock and launched the security app. I then modified the code. Through the front door, I departed. I watched it close as I turned around, and it was finished. No anger. No showmanship. Simply restart. I was aware that they had unraveled. Simply put, I didn't anticipate it being so loud or quick. There was silence at first. Just long enough for me to pause and reflect. Perhaps. Just possibly. They were taking the hit. However, my phone was buzzing like a malfunctioning alarm by the following morning. 9 voicemails and 17 missed calls. All from home. I hadn't changed the name in years. I didn't pay attention. I sent my lawyer the first voicemail. Then I turned on airplane mode and went back to breakfast. Emma watched me chew like I was waiting for something to explode. Do you think they'll show up again? I nodded. They don't know any other play. At 3:04 p.m. They came. Same street. Same driveway. Same fake humility in their posture. My dad stood with arms crossed. Less like a father and more like a disappointed foreman. My sister paced in front of the gate. Phone in hand. Filming herself. I assumed it would end up on Facebook with some caption like, "You never know how cold someone is until you see them. Stop loving you." I watched from upstairs. I didn't move. Then came the shouting. My sister started first. Loud. Unhinged. "You really think this is going to work? You think you're going to freeze us out and look like the victim?" She threw something at the gate. A manila folder. It flopped onto the ground like a failed protest sign. "You can't do this to your family," she screamed. I opened the window slightly and replied with one sentence. "I didn't do this." "You did." That lit the fuse. Dad stepped in. "This isn't over. You don't get to just lock us out and pretend like you're clean." He was trembling. Not with sadness, but with rage. Not the kind that comes from heartbreak. The kind that comes from losing control. He shouted things I hadn't heard from him since I was 13 and forgot to mow the lawn. "You think you can treat me like I don't matter," he spat. "You think because you've got money you can treat us like garbage. Us, those 3 words you owe us." Emma appeared at the doorway behind me. Do they think this is helping their case? They think volume equals power. I said they didn't see I had already moved on. At 6:12 p.m. The email started. The first was from Mom's account. The subject line, "Urgent. Let's be reasonable." I didn't even open it. The preview said enough. "It's not too late to fix this before lawyers get involved." Too late. I forwarded it to my attorney. The second email came 10 minutes later from my dad's work account. A PDF attachment. Cease and desist. I laughed. They really tried to flip the script. Accused me of causing emotional harm. Denying rightful access to jointly used assets in my favorite unlawful revocation of shared family property. It read like a sitcom written by someone who thought drama was the same thing as logic. My reply, I didn't send one. Instead, I drafted a response to my lawyer, 3 pages attached. Every legal document proving sole ownership included screenshots, login records, even a time-stamped photo of the property key handover from 2 years ago. We attached a closing paragraph. Your client has no legal claim. Any further harassment will result in further steps would be taken through legal consultation. This is your formal communication, has been issued by Friday. They lost the mask entirely. My sister went on Instagram Live. I knew she would. She cried on camera. Talked about betrayal. Says she'd never felt so heartbroken. Claimed she was being punished for being close to her parents. Her followers ended up comments filled with emojis and "stay strong." Queen. But I wasn't watching for drama. I was watching for mistakes. She made one. She accidentally flipped the camera during the live show. The inside of my father's office. Specifically the desk drawer where we'd kept the emergency binder. The one with all my account passwords. The one I locked and removed last year. Only they didn't know I'd taken it. My lawyer flagged it. Said if they touched anything, if they tried to impersonate me online, we could escalate to criminal charges. So we waited. It didn't take long. Sunday afternoon. My bank flagged a login attempt from an unrecognized device using an old recovery email tied to my dad's ISP. 2 minutes later, an attempt to access my digital trust dashboard failed. I locked everything again. Reported the incident to the appropriate service provider. Send it to the same legal team I put on retainer 3 years ago. This time we attached a criminal cyber investigation trigger at 10:27 p.m. Mom sent a text. Just 3 words. "What have you done?" I didn't reply. On Monday, it escalated again. A cousin called. One of the few I still liked. "Hey," she said carefully. "Your mom's saying you've gone off the rails. That you're destroying the family." I just said she destroyed it. I just turned the lights on that night. The group chat exploded. Apparently, my sister had sent screenshots of our estate documents to extended family trying to spin the story. Claimed I'd stolen shared wealth. Claimed I was emotionally unstable. Even sent a cropped email from me when she clearly altered. But she wasn't smart enough to crop the timestamp. The real version existed and my lawyer had it. We compiled everything: falsification, slander, illegal access attempts. We sent a formal notice. Any further public defamation will result in a lawsuit. You have 72 hours to retract all statements and issue written apologies. Or we file. That night, my dad texted again. Just one line. You're turning your back on blood. My reply: I'm stepping away from those who only took the next morning. Emma and I went out for breakfast. À qui a dîné? No phones. No noisy. Just sunlight and pancakes. I looked at her and said, I think the storm's almost over. She smiled. No. It's just moving over their house now. They shaped a version. I share the truth. It started with a whisper campaign. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly sent messages like I heard things got complicated. But maybe you should call your mom. Even one of my old high school friends texted. Your sister posted something really off. Are you okay? That's when I knew the shift had begun. They weren't content with guilt. Now they wanted narrative to burn my name before I could speak. My sister was posting cryptic stories. Black screen. White text. Some people turned their back on the ones who raised them. You think you know someone. Mom posted an old photo of the 5 of us captioned "Before money changed everything." A flood of sympathy emojis rolled in and Karen wrote, You were such a close family. So sad to see it fall apart. That's when I stopped playing defense. The next morning I emailed every cousin, every relative, every mutual contact that had been pulled into their spin cycle. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I attached a PDF. 14 pages. Timestamps. Screenshots. Bank transfers. Legal documentation. A timeline of events. And one message at the top. You're free to believe what you want. But this is what actually happened. I didn't explain anything beyond that. Just signed it with my name and let the silence do its work. It didn't take long. By noon, 2 cousins replied. I had no idea. One of them even forwarded me a private message my sister sent, asking them to ignore whatever Mike says. He's spinning it. That one got flagged and passed to my attorney at 3:42 p.m. I got an unexpected call from an old manager of my sister's. I hadn't spoken to her in years. She said, I know this is awkward, but she listed you as a professional reference. And after reading what's floating around online, she trailed off. I didn't rescue her. I just said I'd be careful putting anything in writing on her behalf. By 5 p.m., I was on the phone with the family's old accountant, the one I looped back in after finding the forged paperwork. He said quietly, They're cracking. Mike, you were right. There are gaps in every story they told, and the digital logs you provided. Devastating. He paused. You want to press charges, yet I didn't answer right away because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about punishment. It was about ending the game. So I said, Not yet. But we go public. That evening, I met with my lawyer. We crafted a public statement. Concise. Professional. Factual. No adjectives. Just data. Dates. Actions. Confirmed outcomes. We cited the forged title transfer on authorized financial access and recent slander. We uploaded it to a neutral platform, then linked it via a personal post. When someone uses silence to rewrite history, sometimes the only response is truth. Here's mine. The post didn't go viral. It reached a wide audience quickly. By midnight, over 0 views, hundreds of comments. Not all supportive. But enough. Enough for the balance to shift. Enough to stop their narrative in its tracks. The misunderstandings began to surface. The next morning, the CPA messaged me. They've gone quiet at 11:17 a.m. I got a call from a private number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my mom. Her voice was soft, small, We didn't know it would go this far. Please call me. I didn't. Instead, I sent the final letter through my attorney. A cease and desist for online defamation and a formal release. All past support terminated. Any further interaction to be filtered through legal counsel only. I attached one final clause. Your silence is now required. Not requested. That afternoon, me sister deleted half her posts. My dad took down his profile. My mom blocked me. I didn't care. I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I was just making sure the truth had a louder voice than their fiction. And for the first time in years, it did. They came one last time. No shouting. No crying. No fake apologies. Just Mom standing alone outside the gate, holding a photo album like it was some kind of peace offering. She buzzed once, then waited. Emma asked, "Want me to handle it?" "No." I said, "This one's mine." I stepped out and didn't open the gate. Just stood on the porch, arms crossed. Mom looked smaller than I remembered. Older. But the album in her hands. An attempt to reconnect. Mastered memories. "We were wrong," she said. "But you made it cruel." I didn't speak. She opened the album, turned it toward the camera like I'd melt at the sight of baby pictures. "You were always the quiet one. The good one. That's why you thought I'd never leave." I replied. Her lips tightened. "We just want things back. They were never yours to begin with." "Mike." She tried again, but I cut her off. Calm. Final. "I didn't leave because of a house or money. I left because you never saw me. Just what I could give." She blinked just once. "So that's it," I nodded. "You didn't lose the dinner. I've stepped away to protect my peace." Then I turned and walked back inside. Left her standing there with an album full of memories. She used like currency in this time. I didn't look back.